Before we begin Off the Record, I need to share something important. When federal funding was cut, WKAR lost $1.6 million. Thanks to cost-saving measures and community support, we've closed much of that gap. But we still face a $500,000 shortfall, and we can't finish the job without you. Your financial support keeps programs like Off the Record freely available to everyone in Mid-Michigan. How can you help? Become a sustaining donor today. Already a sustainer? Please consider increasing your monthly contribution. Visit wkar.org/OTR to donate, or click the link in the description. Now, Off the Record.
Thanks for joining us as Republican candidate for Governor Mike Cox is on deck, so sit in with us as we get the inside out. Off the Record.
Production of Off the Record is made possible in part by Bellwether Public Relations, a full-service strategic communications agency partnering with clients through public relations, digital marketing, and issue advocacy. Learn more at bellwetherpr.com. And now, this edition of Off the Record with Tim Skubic.
Thank you very much. Welcome to Studio C. The governor's last budget is out. Did it get any applause? Well, let's see. Lawmakers got their first peek at the governor's last budget, proposing to spend $81.5 billion of your tax dollars. The governor was a no-show, but her budget director, Jen Flood, told lawmakers that the budget shortfall of $1.8 billion in part can be traced to you-know-who in Washington, D.C.
Over the last year, we've seen sweeping changes out of Washington, D.C., pausing grants, enacting tariffs, shifting costs to states, targeting Medicaid, all of which create significant uncertainty for state budgets.
The governor proposes to raise $800 million to fill that budget hole by taxing internet sports gaming, tobacco and vaping products, and swiping $400 million from the state's rainy day fund. Meanwhile, House Republican Speaker Matt Hall promptly declared all of these DOA, dead on arrival.
They're not going to happen. We're not going to raise taxes. We're not going to do any of that.
The governor wants to boost state aid to school kids by $10,300 per pupil. Higher education, however, would not get an increase, but 15 universities would divide $78 million. About an extra $5 million per school. They're probably going to fight to get a higher number. Meanwhile, road and bridge work will get $2 billion, creating 30,000 new jobs. Some seniors are in line for a possible $350 million savings on property taxes, and school kid families could save the 6% sales tax on back-to-school items, if lawmakers say yes. Meanwhile, the speaker says he'll cut $800 million from state spending.
We cut $800 million from the budget last year. We can do it again.
The budget director is not necessarily opposed to cutting the state budget, but not as the total solution.
As families across Michigan are tightening their belts, the state is too, to deliver a budget for the next fiscal year that benefits all Michiganders.
So, as they say in the Olympics, let the budget games begin. All right, so Emily, what was your lead out of that budget?
You know, it's largely a continuation budget, but there are a lot of gymnastics to even get to the point where you can continue because of some
nice
of the...
tie-in with the Olympics.
Well, that's true.
Wrong season.
But, you know, with all the federal cuts, there are a lot of budget pressures on the state that it didn't necessarily experience a year or two ago. So it could be a challenging cycle, even to just largely keep the status quo.
The budget director made it clear that this is not our problem, Billy.
Yeah, they're trying to blame it on D.C., but I don't think they're going to get away with that. House Republicans are absolutely right in their claim that, you know, this is DOA. Not going to happen.
Well, the tug of war begins, as you say, and we're going to have to see what makes it through by budget time in terms of July 1st and whether or not they even meet the deadline or whether or not in her last year they go beyond that. And we hear what we always hear, the schools upset because they didn't get their budget on time to do all the things that they need to do. All of that won't make it through. Some of it's going to make it through. She views it as a budget that protects the things that have been important to her and her constituents over the last 8 years. And they're just going to have to go back and forth and see what makes it out of there. But certainly in a highly political year, there's going to be a lot of push.
I mean, I believe Matt Hall when he says he's not up for some of these tax increases. And I think that's going to be the challenge is like, it's always going to be a lift to ask Republicans to raise taxes. The House is controlled by Republicans. And when you're doing that, you kind of need a really good justification. I mean, I think Democrats have to make the case that there's something unavoidable that has to be funded. And I think there's a lot in this budget that Matt Hall doesn't want to fund.
I think Mr. Hall laid the groundwork for this year's budget by what happened in last year's budget, which he established the idea that we can find stuff to cut waste, fraud, and abuse, to borrow his term, and we can do it again. So why are we talking about tax hikes?
He's claiming that they've already saved the money that, from these appropriation committee.
$349 million.
Work projects. They say, look, we are already doing the job of cutting. If the Democrats will just go along with us, we don't have to raise taxes. It's not going to happen. They've already raised the tax on marijuana last year. Republicans are not all in on hiking sin taxes, so to speak.
And the Whitmer administration has been through this rodeo before, and they just recently went through all of it up under a Hall administration. You can bet that when they sat down in their own room and decided, what are we going to propose in terms of this budget, they are prepared to lose some things. It's just a question of what is it that they're not telegraphing now, but they know when the really tough budgeting gets going in those conversations, they'll say, okay, we'll give up this and we're going to horse trade on this. And Speaker Hall is going to do the exact same thing.
Well, precisely, and he did last time. He gave in on the marijuana tax to fix the roads, okay? He said we weren't going to raise taxes. They raised taxes. Right. So all of this is part of the dance, okay, that, it's taking out positions. Yes?
Yeah, it's part of the dance. I really wonder why Whitmer would actually put forth this budget knowing it's not going to go anywhere. It's a legacy budget in terms of the things that are important to her. So in posterity, she can look back at her last budget and say to the critics and everybody looking at politics, you see what I'm trying to accomplish. But realistically, she's got to know from the get-go that this thing that she proposed is going nowhere. Yes, there are going to be negotiations, but she's going to end up with very little of what you just saw her lay out.
She's always wanted this vaping thing. Remember, she came into office talking about this, and the courts threw it out. She just, she's like a dog that's got a bone. She doesn't want to give up on that one.
There are a couple repeats in this. The raising DNR fees is among them. Certainly the vaping.
Fishing and hunting. I think that's a non-starting North Claire.
So definitely she has some ideas that we've seen before. And also things like the digital advertising tax, which is among the group kind of the biggest revenue source she's looking for on non-vice taxes, if that makes sense.
And I think it's going to be interesting. Keep in mind, this is a budget that you put forward in front of the legislature. It's different than the speech that she's going to be making on the 25th when she does her State of the State, which is to the general public. I'm waiting to see what it is that she prioritizes in that speech that goes along with the budget that she really highlights to be able to say, these are the things I want to get done in my last year. Sort of like what she did on the cell phone stuff with the schools, which was in the last State of the State. She finally got that done, and she got that signed.
One thing's really interesting this year is the State of the State comes after the budget.
Yeah.
This is very unusual. Usually you do the State of the State and we sit around and wait for the budget. Now the budget is out there, so what is she going to say about what she's proposed in her State of the State?
Well, she'll look at the lawmakers and say, look, I want this stuff. I know you guys don't, but the people support me. Looking into the camera, rallying the troops. All right, I have a prediction. I had an original thought last night. They do the budget and they leave town. They don't do anything else.
What's the timeline on this prediction?
Before July 1.
Okay.
In fact, way before.
This is like old-fashioned politics. Get out of town by July 1st and start campaigning.
You
That's
want to
what
get
they want to
reelected,
do.
or do you want to do a budget? Do you want to sit here through the summer and mess around with numbers, or do you want to get your own numbers?
Yeah.
You aren't buying this, Mr. Stokes.
No. I think that's very plausible because all of them are, she's not running again, but everybody else is running again, and she wants to make sure that hopefully the people she wants to get elected have the time to get out there and campaign and get elected.
I want to just bring up one point. Mr. Hall has now for 2 weeks talked about closing the revolving door. And for people that don't know what a revolving door is, it's a door that goes around and goes from the legislature to the lobby corps. And Mr. Hall is on a mission, and this might be a trading item here, okay, to close that door, Billy.
Yeah, I think it's a winning issue.
Have we been here before?
We've been here.
How many
times? Oh, my God.
How many hands and feet do you have?
Times. He put a new twist on. He said, I want to save Sam Singh, who is the Democratic floor leader in the Senate. He's saying this guy is way out in left field, but he's smart, and he's a great person.
And he's a good deal maker.
And and I want to keep him in the legislature. If we can stop the revolving door, we'll keep Sam Singh, and that's a good thing for Michigan.
What is so onerous about going from a legislator to a lobbyist?
So onerous. I don't know. It's a short trip, certainly, with the geography of some of these offices. And, you know, Michigan doesn't have a cooling off period, which I think other states have experimented with and seen some success with.
Well, the law does say that if you accept a lobby job halfway through your term, you can't take it. You got to finish out your term, which is not a great reform, but why are you going like that?
Well, I think what Speaker Hall is doing is he's hitting on something that I think will resonate with the average citizen. And they look at politics now and they say, you know, there's just too much willing and dealing, and all these folks do is they get in there, they become legislators, second later they're in lobbyists, and it's just quid pro quo, and it's back and forth, and we're sick and tired of it.
Well, the good government people would tell you the danger in that is, while you are sitting as a legislator, as a chairperson of a committee, and you've got a lobby group that works on that committee, are there exchanges of ideas and stuff in order to get legislation, in order to get a job? Nobody's ever proven that, but that hangs over this debate, does it not, guys?
It not only hangs over it, it's an actual fact. Happening right before our very eyes, but nobody really talks about it.
All right, let's talk about the bridge over troubled waters. Chuck?
Wow. Well, you know, this is one of those situations where, you know, you look at the op-ed piece that Governor Snyder wrote for the Detroit News. I thought it was very well written, and it pointed out something that we've all been reporting and dealing with, is once again the Trump administration, President Trump particularly, puts something out there that gets a lot of talk, a lot of controversy, and do all of that. But when you
Gordie Howe
the International Bridge. But Rick Snyder, who was Republican governor at the time this all really started and has a major part in all of this, he just took it fact by fact and proved that the administration didn't have their homework together when they made some of the accusations that they made, and he didn't go after the president on a personal level. He just said, this is wrong, here's the facts,
Here's the problem, Chuck. Don't let the facts get in the way of a good political move.
Absolutely. And you've got the Maroon family involved in this because there were meetings between them and the president. They haven't wanted this bridge from day one because it cuts into the profit that they've got on the Ambassador Bridge, and this goes back and forth. But I think when all the posturing is said and done, I think that bridge is going to be okay, and I think there are enough people in Michigan from both political parties that are going to make sure this happens.
The governor had the right take on this. Until she talks to him personally, nothing counts. I remember we did an interview 2 or 3 years ago, and she said that with Mr. Trump, he says a lot of stuff, okay, but if you read what happens afterwards, it never happens. So her thing was rather sanguine about this thing. She was not knee-jerking at all.
This is the first time that the future of this bridge has been in question
for
several years. But I do think that, you know, some of the uncertainty in the past about this bridge has been about building it, about whether it can get done, about whether, you know, governments would issue permits. It's a different question to have a nearly finished piece of infrastructure that people can stare at but not use, right? Like, I live in Detroit. I see this bridge. I swim in the waters under Belle Isle.
Goodness.
But, yeah, it's great. But, you know, I think that it's a little bit of a different question when there's a bridge that people can see, and a little bit of a different question because it's hard to envision just letting a resource go to waste, especially one that the business community is supportive of.
Nothing else has stopped this bridge before now. Certainly, this is not going to stop it.
Well, and the Republicans were saying maybe we'll get some money out of this. Okay, if we get part of the tolls, what's wrong with that? Huh?
Nothing wrong with that, but when all said and done, this thing is going through lickety-split.
All right,
You got to think back to the fact that if President Trump was so concerned about this bridge, why didn't he say something about it in his first term when Governor Snyder was sitting here as the Republican governor of this state?
There you go, Chuck. Wow. Precisely. Let's call in Mike Cox, okay? Attorney General candidate for Republican governor. How's it going out there in the campaign trail?
Going great.
Yeah?
I'm heading up to UP after this. Dog sled racing time. It's good times in Marquette.
Do you have a dog sled that you bought?
I'm going to get a little one of Jay's on, up in Gaylord on the way. So I'll be ready.
All right, so check in on the bridge. That's the president. He's going to open that bridge, isn't he?
Hey, this is making a mountain out of a molehill. This is Donald Trump 101. I think the governor's right. He's ultimately about negotiating, getting a better deal. We should be able to sell our products in Canada. That's what he wants. And he's going to get a better deal for America. It's that simple.
So the Democrats overreacted.
Of course. I mean, I hate to use TDS, but that's really what it is. And so you get Slotkin and other people who want to feed their beasts and say, hey, I'm fighting Trump, and this is another way to do that. But I think the governor is exactly right. All he's doing is trying to squeeze a little extra leverage out of Canada, and I'm all for that.
Emily.
If you're governor of Michigan, you're not doing anything to stop that bridge or help him with that cause, are you?
This issue is going to be settled long before that. I'm focused on two things, all right? Let's revolutionize education here in Michigan. Let's make it like Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, which is putting us to shame. And then number two, let's get off the mat, right? Economically, we've been at the bottom of the barrel for so long. And if we look at the best states, the fastest growing states in America, they've eliminated their income tax. Those are my two issues. And I'm not going to get distracted about, the bridge or opening. Here's the reality, Emily. It hasn't opened in 2 years. It's 2 years late already. So we're really talking about a sideshow here.
And what's your current relationship with the Maroon family? I know you've represented them in some bridge interests in the past.
Well, I have a relationship. Hello, how you doing? They weren't smart enough to hire me for all the appeals, and look how they turned out. So,
well, General, you seem to find yourself running in multi-candidate fields. In 2010, you had, I think, 4 opponents. Now you got there 8 in your race so far. How do you cut through the noise? How do you make your themes resonate with the voting public?
It's the lessons I learned as a Marine at 18 years old. You have to be disciplined, you have to be focused, and you have to believe in the process. It's boring, but I hit it each and every day. If you look at social media, there's no candidate on either side of the aisle who's working as hard as I am. And here's the thing. I remember people would tell me, we loved you as Attorney General, but you've never been in business. And I'd say, but I reduced the size of the staff by 21%. Do you remember as a loss? Yeah.
34 employees.
Say what?
There were 34 employees was your 26%. Is that accurate?
No, it was 125.
All right, then somebody's lying.
And we did that during the lost decade while the demand was going up. And they'd say, well, you've never been in business before. How do you know how to create jobs? Well, now I've created jobs. I've been in business. I've negotiated huge deals, and I'm a much better candidate.
Mr. Attorney General, should we nationalize our elections? We're in a heavy election year, important midterm election year. You're a candidate.
Right.
You're going to be running. That's something that the president floated this week, and he specifically mentioned Detroit.
Yeah. Well, Chuck, as you know, Detroit's been a problem forever, okay? When I ran against Gary Peters, won the closest statewide race in 100 years, Detroit found a bag of 3,000 to 4,000 absentee ballots on the Friday after the election. And don't take my word for it, ask our lieutenant governor, who's been trumpeting the problems with Detroit elections much longer than President Trump. That question's going to be settled. Ultimately, here's the other thing. We do have federalized elections. The federal government has been coming in since the Civil Rights Voting Act of 1964. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I'm really focused on making my win too big to rig, and that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, but let's get a little more specific. Is there widespread fraud in the state of Michigan that would make you say we need to have national election rather than the state handling the election as it has for a long period of time?
Well, here's my position, Chuck. I won by less than a vote per precinct. Less than a vote with the first time. Second time, I won by 11%. That always makes you leery of counting. And like I said, when I won on election the Wednesday, I had 4,800 votes. That was up on Gary Peters. And there was an informal recount for 3 weeks. And that bag of absentee ballots never got open. I tell you, that scared me straight. So I'm always worried about election integrity.
President Trump doesn't think he won the 2020 election or thinks he did win it.
Right.
Do you think he did?
Well, here's what I know. Okay, here's what I know. I know that the Secretary of State, Jocelyn Benson, violated 2 different provisions of the absentee ballot law. And that was found by a Snyder Court of Appeals judge, and that was found by a Whitmer Court of Appeals judge. I'm really focused on what's going on this year, and I'm going to make sure I get enough votes to win handily.
Did President Trump win the 2020 election, yes or no?
In Michigan or where?
In the United States.
Yeah. I'm not going to answer that because that's really a sideshow. Because it's really a sideshow. President Trump and I are focused on the future. All right. Was there dramatic irregularities? 100%. Is there a reason for people to question the integrity of elections? 100%. In fact, Democrats have been questioning the integrity of elections since 2000.
So, as an officer of the court,
right,
all of the courts that declared the election to be legal got it wrong?
I'm just saying they've already ruled and we move on.
So then he did lose the election or he did win the election. Which is it? Why don't you want to answer that question? Are you afraid?
No, I'm not afraid. But it's like, let me ask you this: what does that have to do with fixing education? What does that have to do with fixing our economy?
Well, it has to do about leveling with the people at home on what you believe inside.
About something that we've all moved on from?
Something that you don't want to touch because it's politically too hot to handle?
No, not at all. In fact, the Trump campaign hired me last November to make sure that they got a fair shake. And General, that's what happened.
You got a new opponent just a couple of weeks ago.
Right.
Perry Johnson, multimillionaire, $3 million in ads on Super Bowl Sunday. What did he do to the race that you're in right now? Did he have any effect on you or on your opponents that you can see that's worthwhile communicating right now?
Of course, any new entrant has an effect. I'm just kind of like, I march each and every day. I'm like a stoic Roman. I can only control what I can control.
So you don't care whether he got in the race
I don't
or
care.
Not.
I view it as, it's just another factor you got to consider. It's the facts on the ground. And here's the reality. People say, what would you do if there was a Democrat legislature? Well, I'd do what I would do when I was in Wayne County, and I worked with Democrats. Or when I was Attorney General, I worked with Democrats. Or when I had a $500 million settlement against U of M, I worked primarily with Democrat plaintiff attorneys. I'd figure it out. To me, it's just another fact on the ground.
One of your big themes back in 2010, I remember,
Right.
was in 2002, I should say, deadbeat dads. How did you do in that mission, getting rid of deadbeat dads?
Well, we never say deadbeat dads because about 10% are women. But I'm really proud of this.
Child support.
Yeah, before I ran, no one talked about it, right? And since I was Attorney General, General Schuette and now General Nessel have continued, collected over $500 million, helped tens of thousands of children. But more so, in family courts, they now say, hey, Mr. Ballinger, if you don't pay your child support, we're sending you to AG's office. And that really moved the needle, and I'm very, very proud of that.
Your campaign.
And it actually polls better with Democrats than Republicans.
Are you talking about it this year?
I'm really focused on education and the economy.
Okay.
Mr. Attorney General, your campaign slogan on your website says, fighting to make Michigan great again, a state that you've done pretty well with politically and financially.
Right.
What is the biggest problem in your mind that the state of Michigan faces right now?
We accept the SOS. I don't think I have to say it. We have such low expectations. Literally, my dad walked across the Blue Water Bridge, hitchhiked down to Southwest Detroit to meet a sponsor to get here legal. And he used to tell me when I was a kid growing up, and he was a carpenter, he said, Michael, when I came here, literally the streets were paved with gold. And for me, and my family, it was. My dad was a carpenter. He raised 3 kids. My mom was a maid, and we were on a safe street, good schools, and every parent thought their kid could do better than they did. And we've lost that, Chuck. We've lost that. The states that people used to come to Michigan from down south or Eastern European, all our children are going to those states now, and they're doing better on jobs, doing better on education. And I'm like, damn it, we need to start fighting. We need to grab a hold of this and let's do something revolutionary to make this state great
Mr.
again.
Cox, you made a big deal out of getting rid of the state income tax. I've not heard any...
Haven't done it yet. You have to get me elected
that's
first.
What I would like to get at.
Yeah.
Okay, it's really nice to say to get rid of it. There's lost revenue. How do you replace that lost revenue, sir?
Well, let's talk about this, Tim. The governor took over $56.8 billion. She's now proposing $88.1 billion. My math is sort of right. That's $31 billion. The income tax is $13 billion. $13 billion. And I defy any of you to say, what new service have you gotten? And your viewers, what new service have you gotten for that 30-plus billion?
But do you have a list of cuts that you could implement on day one? Because rolling the tax back is easy.
Yeah.
Replacing the revenue, it's $13 billion and some loose change. How are you going to do it?
I'm going to do it the way I navigated the AG's office, where our demand went up by 10%, and we had 22% less folks to meet that demand. So it's the same thing I did each and every week in my business.
So you're going to cut $13 billion out of the budget?
Yes.
$13 billion out of the budget?
Yes.
You think you could get Democratic votes for that, sir?
I will when the time comes. And here's the reality, Tim, as you know, I got 9 months to work on that first budget, right? But here's the reality. I'm not going to tell you today, like when I sued U of M on behalf of 1,078 sexual assault survivors, do you think in the first negotiating session we went and said, oh, we'll settle for $490 million? No, of course not. It's a process, right?
You want to stay for overtime?
I got to get to the UP. I got 5-10 minutes.
We'll hold the boat at the bridge for you.
Okay.
Hang on. We'll be back with more from Mr. Cox and Off the Record. Go to WKAR.org. Right now, take a look at these close credits.
Production of Off the Record is made possible in part by Bellwether Public Relations, a full-service strategic communications agency partnering with clients through public relations, digital marketing, and issue advocacy. Learn more at bellwetherpr.com. For more Off the Record, visit WKAR.org. Michigan public television stations have contributed to the production costs of Off the Record.